Welcome back to the channel. Before we dive in, make sure you hit that like button to help support the channel. Your support helps spread these videos so more people can enjoy them. Thank you for that. And now, let's get to the story. October 12th, 1999. Hey, my name's Jeremiah Holt. I'm a mechanic by trade, living alone in a small town near the Ozark Mountains. Been through a divorce, no kids, just me. I've always been a bit of a loner. Nature's my thing. I prefer the silence of the woods over the noise of city life. That's why I decided to buy a cabin a few years ago. It wasn't anything fancy. A small one-room place with a little kitchen, a fireplace, and a bathroom the size of a broom closet. But it was mine, and it gave me the peace I needed. I remember the day everything changed like it happened yesterday. It was October 12th, 1999, the start of deer season. Now, I've got a hunting rifle, but I'm not really a hunter. For me, deer season was more about taking a break, retreating to the cabin, soaking in the cool fall air, and having a couple of beers by the campfire. The drive up that day was uneventful. Just the usual winding roads through the mountains. The trees were all fiery reds and oranges, the colors of fall in full bloom. As I pulled up to the cabin, that familiar sense of calm washed over me. The woods around here were old, like ancient old, with a kind of presence that both relaxed and intrigued me. The first few days were just like any other hiking the trails, chopping firewood, fixing things up around the cabin. This time, I patched up a leaky spot in the roof. It was good, honest work, nothing like the complicated stuff I dealt with back in town, fixing cars and dealing with stubborn customers. The evenings were my favorite. I'd sit on the porch with a cold beer in hand, watching the sun dip behind the trees. The forest would come alive with sounds, the hoot of owls, crickets chirping, and the rustle of animals moving in the underbrush. But then, one evening, I started to feel like something was off. It started with a feeling, really a kind of chill, running down the back of my neck, like I was being watched. I tried shaking it off, blaming it on the isolation. But then I heard it, footsteps, heavy ones, circling around the cabin at first. I thought maybe it was just a drunk hunter who got lost. It wouldn't have been the first time someone wandered onto my little slice of paradise by mistake. So I called out, "Hey there, you lost?" My voice echoed in the night, but there was no response, just an eerie silence that seemed to swallow up everything around me. No crickets, no owls, nothing. I waited, straining my ears for any sound, but there was only silence. Finally, I convinced myself it was just a deer or maybe a black bear, nothing to worry about. I went to bed, but sleep didn't come easy. The next morning, I woke early, still feeling unsettled. I figured I'd take a quick look around the cabin just to calm my nerves. That's when I saw them dot tracks in the soft earth around the cabin. Now, I've seen my fair share of animal tracks, but these were unlike anything I'd ever seen. They were huge, bigger than a bear's, and each step left behind long, curved claw marks. The stride was massive, which told me whatever made them was tall, really tall. As I followed the tracks, I noticed something else, stuffs of dark, coarse fur snagged on a low-hanging branch near one of the windows. I didn't recognize it as any animal fur I knew. My stomach churned with a mix of fear and curiosity. Something didn't feel right, but I couldn't put my finger on it. I grabbed my hunting rifle for good measure. Better safe than sorry, I thought. That night, things escalated. The noises came back, but this time they were unmistakable. There was something out there, something big. I could hear it moving around the cabinet's heavy footsteps, crunching through the fallen leaves. Then came the scratching, horrible sound of claws dragging across the wooden walls. I sat there in my chair by the fireplace, rifle in my hands, waiting. The scratching circled the cabin, moving from wall to wall. Then I heard it, a low, rumbling growl. It seemed to vibrate through the floorboards, and I knew right away it wasn't an animal. It was something else. I gathered my courage and moved to the window, peering out into the darkness. The fire cast flickering shadows across the yard, and in those shadows I saw it, a massive, hulking shape, far too tall to be natural. Its head was cocked at an odd angle, like it was studying the cabin. Studying me, my heart started pounding so loudly. I thought the creature could hear it now. I'm not the kind of guy who gets scared easily. I've dealt with angry customers, barroom brawls, name it. But this was something else. Every instinct in my body screamed danger. I decided I had to do something. I couldn't just sit here. With shaking hands, I moved toward the door, planning to fire a warning shot over its head. But the moment I cracked open the door, I froze. There it was, crouched on my porch, not 10 feet away from me. In that moment, bathed in the warm light spilling from the door, I finally got a good look at the creature. And let me tell you, even now, years later, it's hard to put into words what I saw. My mind just rebels against it. The thing was massive, easily as tall as me. Even in its crouched position, its body was lean, but rippling with muscles beneath taut, leathery skin. Its arms were too long, ending in hands with claws that looked sharp enough to gut a deer in one swipe. Those claws were dripping with some dark, viscous fluid that I prayed wasn't blood. But it was its head that really haunted me. It had a long, wolfish snout, filled with jagged teeth that could tear through bone. Its nose was split, flaring as it sniffed the air. And those eyes, God, those eyes. They were sickly yellow, glowing with an unnatural light, filled with intelligence that made my blood run cold. This wasn't just some animal. There was something calculating behind those eyes. For what felt like forever, we just stared at each other. I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. My finger was frozen on the rifle's trigger. The creature tilted its head like a curious dog. Then it hissed. A sound so alien, so terrifying, that it broke me from my trance. I slammed the door shut, my hand shaking as I fumbled to lock it. I quickly moved to barricade the door, dragging over anything I could find. I could still hear the creature circling the cabin, its heavy footsteps, the occasional scratch against the walls. Sleep was impossible. I spent the night huddled in a corner, my rifle aimed at the door, jumping at every sound. Those glowing eyes peered in through the windows, watching, waiting. I've never felt so hunted, so vulnerable in all my life. When the first rays of sunlight finally began to filter through the windows, the noises stopped. I waited for hours, straining my ears for any sign of the creature. Finally, when the sun was fully up, I gathered the courage to look outside. The area around the cabin looked like a war zone. Deep furrows in the earth, trees scarred with deep claw marks, and more of that dark, coarse fur. But what caught my attention were the tracks, those same massive, clawed footprints from the day before. They led deeper into the woods. I knew I should leave. I should pack up and get the hell out of there. But something held me back. Maybe it was curiosity. Maybe I couldn't believe what had happened and needed proof. Whatever the reason, I found myself following those tracks into the woods. Peterson family, I tried to call out, but the words caught in my raw, burning throat. The last thing I remember is collapsing against the wall, the world fading to darkness around me. I woke up in the county hospital, disoriented and in pain. The next few days passed in a haze of morphine, worried doctors, and confused questions. I drifted in and out of consciousness, haunted by nightmares of glowing red eyes and savage claws. When I was finally lucid enough to string together coherent thoughts, a county sheriff named Grady came to see me. He was a stocky man, with a thick Ozark accent and eyes that had seen too much. He'd heard my delirious ramblings when I was brought in, and at first I think he wrote them off as the product of shock and blood loss. But something changed his mind. Tom Peterson had survived the attack and made it back to his home. He corroborated my story, describing the creature in chilling detail that matched my own recollections. The reality of what we'd seen was too terrifying, too unbelievable for either of us to have made it up. Grady told me they launched a search. He called in reinforcements, even alerted the National Guard. They went into those woods armed too. The teeth, and tracked for 2 solid days, but they found nothing. No fur, no blood, no tracks. Nothing to justify the hunt or explain what had happened that night. The official story: a bear attack. Maybe a large cat that had wandered out of its usual territory. The fireworks, they said, must have spooked it, causing it to lash out. It was easier to believe, I suppose, than the truth. But I knew what I had seen, and so did Tom. The little girl didn't survive. Her name was Lily, and she was only 6 years old. Her brother Michael was physically recovering from his injuries, but the trauma of that night would likely stay with him forever. The Petersons left the area soon after, disappearing without a trace. I don't blame them. I couldn't stay either. As soon as I was well enough to leave the hospital, I sold the cabin. I couldn't bear the thought of going back there, of living with the memories and the fear of what might still be lurking in those woods. I moved to the city, surrounded myself with noise and people, and light anything to keep the darkness at bay. But the scars remained, both physical and mental. The long gashes across my chest and shoulder healed into thick, ropey scars that ached when the weather changed. The nightmares came less frequently as the years passed, but they never truly went away. Some nights I still wake up in a cold sweat, the phantom sensation of hot breath on my face and the sound of inhuman growls echoing in my ears. In the years that followed, I became obsessed with finding an explanation for what happened that night. I scoured local newspapers, online forums, and obscure cryptozoology websites, searching for any hint of similar encounters. I reached out to wildlife experts, folklorists, and even a few self-proclaimed monster hunters, hoping someone could shed light on what we had seen. Most dismissed my story outright. A few suggested it might have been a particularly large black bear with some kind of deformity or disease. Others proposed more outlandish theories, everything from escaped government experiments to interdimensional beings. None of it felt right. I tried to track down the Peterson family, hoping to compare notes with Tom or see how they were coping, but it was like they had vanished into thin air. No forwarding address, no social media presence, nothing. It was as if they were running from something, trying to erase all traces of their existence. My search led me down some dark paths. I found myself in seedy bars on the outskirts of small Ozark towns, listening to hushed stories of things that shouldn't exist. I hiked into remote areas, following vague leads and half-remembered sightings. More than once, I found myself alone, in the woods as night fell, my heart racing at every snap of a twig or rustling leaf. But I never found any concrete evidence. No photographs, no DNA samples, nothing that could prove beyond a shadow of a doubt that what Tom and I had seen was real. The lack of proof was maddening, but in a way, it was also a relief. Part of me didn't want to confirm that such a creature truly existed. As the years passed, my obsession gradually faded. I still kept an eye on the news from that region, still felt a chill when I heard about unexplained disappearances or strange animal sightings, but I learned to live with the uncertainty, to accept that some questions might never be answered. It's been 25 years since that night in the Ozarks. I'm older now. My hair's graying at the temples, and the scars on my chest have faded to silver lines. I've built a life for myself, found some measure of peace, but I've never forgotten. Sometimes, when the wind howls just right, or when I'm alone in the dark, I'm transported back to that moment. I can smell the pine needles and feel the humid summer air on my skin. I can hear the creatures growl and see those glowing red eyes in the shadows. I don't know if what we encountered that night was some unknown species, a freak of nature, or something beyond our understanding. I don't know if it's still out there, lurking in the deep woods, waiting for another unfortunate soul to cross its path. Part of me hopes it died from its wounds, that the nightmare ended that night. But another part of me knows better, that the world is vast and full of mysteries. There are dark corners where ancient things still dwell, where the line between reality and nightmare blurs. Most people go through their lives never glimpsing what lies beyond the veil of the ordinary, and maybe that's for the best. But for those of us who have seen it, who have felt the touch of the unknown, the world is never quite the same. We walk with one foot in shadow, always aware that the impossible might be waiting just around the corner. So, if you find yourself in the wilderness, whether it's the Ozark Mountains or any other remote place, remember this story. Be aware of your surroundings, listen to your instincts, and if you hear something moving in the dark, something too big to be a deer or a bear. Don't investigate. Don't try to be a hero. Run. Run as fast and as far as you can, because sometimes the monsters are real. As the ancient oak withered away, so did the creature, writhing in agony. The earth beneath it seemed to tremble, as if reacting to the violent energy it had released. The shrieks and growls that had haunted me for so long were now drowned out by the creaking and cracking of the once mighty tree. It felt like the world itself was rejecting the thing that had terrorized these woods, a force that should never have existed in the first place. I staggered back, watching as the tree's death echoed across the clearing. The creature's form continued to twist and distort, its massive, hulking shape breaking apart as if it were never meant to hold together. Its glowing eyes began to dim, losing their unnatural light, fading into an empty darkness. The horrifying visage of myself, my doppelganger, was now nothing more than a twisted silhouette, crumbling into the earth with a final scream that left my ears ringing as the last of the creature dissolved. The clearing fell eerily silent. The breeze that had once carried the scent of fear was now filled with the scent of decay. The oppressive weight that had hung over the woods for so long lifted, and I felt the tension in my chest ease, though the terror I had just faced still gripped my heart. I collapsed to the ground beside the remnants of the oak, exhausted and battered, my body screaming in pain from the battle I had just fought. I had no idea how long I lay there, but as the first light of day broke over the horizon, I knew that my ordeal was finally over. The nightmare had come to an end. But what had I truly destroyed? Was it just the physical manifestation of something darker, something deeper? Or had I obliterated the very essence of an ancient force, one that had been waiting for its moment to return? The questions swirled in my mind, and even as I tried to push them away, I knew that I couldn't stop wondering. I struggled to my feet, my legs barely holding me up, but I had no choice. I had to leave this cursed place, no matter how much I wanted to believe I had rid these woods of the creature that haunted me. I couldn't be sure it was truly gone. Something about the woods felt different now, as if the battle had left its mark, leaving behind a shadow of what had once been. I began the long walk back to the cabin, my thoughts clouded with confusion and disbelief. There was no one left to tell, no one who would believe me. The authorities had long dismissed my warnings, and even if I tried to explain it to them now, they would never understand. No one would ever believe what had happened here. But as I neared the cabin, I found myself hesitating. The place had been my sanctuary, my home, but it was now a tomb. It was the final battleground where I had faced the unknown, and though I had survived, I couldn't bear to stay. I couldn't risk living in constant fear, waiting for the other shoe to drop. I packed what I could, just the essentials, and headed for the door. As I glanced over my shoulder one last time, I saw the oak tree, now reduced to a blackened stump. It had once been the heart of the forest, a symbol of something ancient, but now it was nothing more than a memory of what had been. I drove away from the cabin without looking back, my hands trembling on the steering wheel. The road ahead was uncertain, but at least it was away from the terror that had haunted me for so long. I didn't know what I would find in the future, but I knew one thing. I would never forget the truth I had uncovered, the things I had seen, and the battle that had nearly destroyed me. The creature might have been defeated for now, but the memory of a dove, the darkness it had brought, would linger with me forever. And maybe, just maybe, it would return, because some nightmares never truly die. They just wait and watch, and wait for their chance to rise again. And as I drove away, the thought that haunted me most was this: was I really free, or had I simply become another part of its twisted game, invited me for a weekend hike through the backwoods of Maine? We'd been planning the trip for months, but life had a habit of getting in the way, and I hadn't had a real chance to reconnect with nature in years. So, when Kyle called me up, suggesting we take a break from our usual routine and head into the wilderness, I jumped at the chance. The plan was simple: spend 2 days hiking, camping, and unwinding far away from the stresses of everyday life. The kind of trip that would let us forget about work and everything else for a while. We packed light, just the essentials: backpacks, sleeping bags, water, a few snacks, and our trusty old rifles, just in case we ran into anything wild. We drove for hours, winding through back roads, and when we finally reached the trailhead, the forest felt like it was welcoming us. The air was thick with the scent of pine, and the distant sound of birdsong reminded me of childhood trips with my dad. It was perfect, almost too perfect. We set off on the trail, the familiar crunch of gravel beneath our boots as we ventured deeper into the woods. The first day was everything I expected. The sun filtered through the canopy, casting dappled light across the forest floor. We talked about everything and nothing, the way old friends do, reminiscing about our high school days, cracking jokes, and sharing stories about our lives since those carefree times. There was no sense of urgency, no pressure, just two guys reconnecting with the world around them. By evening, we found a good spot to set up camp near a stream. The fire crackled, and we settled in with beers in hand, our conversation meandering from mundane to profound. The night air was cool, and I could feel the weight of the day's hike settling into my muscles. Kyle fell asleep almost immediately, but I stayed up for a while, staring into the fire, lost in my thoughts. That's when I first heard it, a soft rustling just on the edge of the tree line. At first, I thought it was the wind, or maybe a small animal making its way through the underbrush. But then it came again, heavier, more deliberate. I strained my eyes into the darkness, but I saw nothing. I brushed it off, attributing it to the typical sounds of the forest at night. After all, this was Maine. Plenty of animals roamed these woods, and the sound of creatures moving about was nothing new. Still, there was something unsettling about it, a gut feeling I couldn't shake, so I kept my rifle close. The next morning, we packed up and continued our hike. The uneasy feeling from the night before lingered in the back of my mind, but I pushed it aside. As we trekked deeper into the woods, the air grew denser, the trees thicker, and the usual sounds of wildlife seemed to fade. The trail narrowed, and I started to feel as if we were walking into a place that hadn't seen human footsteps in a long time. We were nearing the end of the trail when it happened again, the rustling, now accompanied by a low growl. This time, I wasn't imagining it. There was something out there, something large enough to be making that noise. Kyle, ever the optimist, laughed it off, assuming it was just a bear. But my instincts were telling me otherwise. I motioned for him to stay quiet, and we crouched down, trying to pinpoint the sound. The growl grew louder, closer, and then, from the shadows between the trees, it appeared. A figure, towering and twisted, emerged from the darkness. It was a creature unlike anything I had ever seen before. Its body was unnaturally long, with limbs that seemed to stretch in impossible directions. The skin was pale, almost translucent, and its face, if you could even call it that, was an eerie combination of man and beast. The eyes glowed an unnatural yellow, reflecting the light from the fire, and the growl it emitted was pure malice. I couldn't move. I couldn't speak. It was like everything in the world had frozen, and there was only this creature staring at us with its unblinking eyes. Kyle must have sensed the danger too, because he suddenly stopped laughing and began reaching for his rifle. But before he could even raise it, the creature lunged. I don't know how we managed to survive that encounter. We ran, our hearts pounding in our chests, crashing through the underbrush, desperate to put distance between us and the nightmare behind us. But the creature was far too fast, and it wasn't just hunting us for food. It was hunting us for sport, driven by some primal urge we couldn't understand. We made it back to the trailhead by sheer luck, adrenaline driving us forward. I don't even remember how we got there. All I could hear was the sound of our breath, ragged and terrified, and the silence that had fallen over the woods. When we reached the truck, we didn't look back. We drove 4 miles without saying a word, both of us too stunned by what we'd seen to process it. The rest of the weekend was a blur, and I couldn't shake the feeling that something was still out there, following us, waiting for us to make a mistake. The drive back home felt like an eternity. I could still hear that growl echoing in my mind, still feel the weight of those glowing eyes watching me from the darkness. As much as I tried to convince myself it was just a hallucination, just a figment of my imagination, deep down I knew the truth. The creature was real, and it was still out there. Years have passed since that trip, and I've done my best to move on. I stopped hiking, stopped camping, and stayed far away from the woods where I had once felt so at home. I've tried to bury the memories, to convince myself that it was just some kind of freak encounter, something we could never explain. But every now and then, when the wind howls just right, or the night feels too still, I remember, and I wonder, is it still out there, waiting for someone else to come too close? Or is it waiting for me to finish what it started? I'll never be sure. But one thing is certain, those woods aren't just haunted by memories. Some places are haunted by something much worse, something that doesn't forget, something that doesn't die. I don't think I could. Not after everything that happened. His voice was thick with emotion, and I could feel the weight of those memories hanging between us. It had been years, but I knew he hadn't fully moved on either. None of us ever do. A few more months passed before the quiet unease that had settled into my life became too much to ignore. It had been nearly 5 years since that trip to Baxter State Park, but the fear, the unknown, lingered. The shadows had never quite left me. I'd never found out who the cult members were or what their intentions were, but I couldn't shake the feeling that they hadn't gone away. Something still watched over that place in the woods. One day, I found myself driving the familiar roads again, the ones that led to the park. I didn't know why I did it. Maybe it was because I'd never really gotten closure. Or maybe I was trying to prove something to myself, that what happened that summer wasn't real, that it was all in our heads. As I reached the outskirts of Baxter State Park, I felt the weight of my decision press down on me. The landscape looked unchanged. The towering pines still lined the road, their needles whispering in the wind. But the feeling in the air was different. It was heavier, like something was waiting. I pulled into the park entrance, the old ranger station standing like a sentinel. No one was there, just a few parked vehicles. I'd heard the rumors, of course. Other campers had disappeared, strange occurrences still being reported every now and then, but no one had connected the dots, not officially. The authorities still believed it was some kind of coincidence, just wild animals or maybe some crazed loners. But deep down, I knew better. I parked the truck at the same trailhead where we had started that fateful hike, the one that led to the cabin we'd explored. For the first time since that weekend, I was going to walk it again. There was no turning back now. The woods felt different as I walked, more oppressive, like they were holding their breath, watching me with 1,000 unseen eyes. My footsteps echoed loudly in the silence. I kept my hand on the rifle, just in case. When I reached the abandoned cabin, the same eerie feeling crept up my spine. The vines still clung to the rotting wood, and the broken windows stared back at me like hollow eyes. But there was something else now, a sense of presence, something ... watching. I didn't go inside, I couldn't. The memory of what we had found, the journal, the strange symbols, and the cult's presence flooded back in full force. I turned and headed back down the trail, but the feeling of being followed persisted. It wasn't in my head. I knew it wasn't. That night, as I set up camp by the lake again, I felt the familiar dread creeping in. The air was too still, the forest too quiet. The only sounds were the occasional crackling of the campfire and the rustling of the trees in the distance. But then it happened. The footsteps. I froze, my heart pounding. It wasn't a deer. It wasn't the wind. The footsteps were slow, deliberate, and they were coming closer. I grabbed my rifle, my fingers shaking as I pointed it into the dark, but I saw nothing. Just the shadows, stretching long and unnaturally. In the firelight, the footsteps stopped. And then I heard a voice, a whisper, "Michael." My blood ran cold. It was a voice I knew. Chad's eye spun around, my breath caught in my throat. But there was no one there. The silence returned, but now it was broken by a low, guttural growl from the woods. Something was out there, something I couldn't explain. I didn't wait for it to get any closer. I grabbed my gear and ran. I didn't look back. I didn't stop until I was in the truck. Speeding away, the familiar roads blurring past me as the night swallowed the park hole. As I drove back toward the safety of town, I realized that I would never be free of the woods, of that place. The memories would never fade. The creature would never die, and as I glanced in the rearview mirror one last time, I could have sworn I saw something watching me from the darkness, but I couldn't be sure. All I knew was that whatever haunted Baxter State Park, whatever those cult members had disturbed all those years ago, was still out there, waiting for the next person to wander into its domain. I wasn't sure what would happen next, but I had a sinking feeling I would never be the same again. As the years passed, the nightmares faded, but the question remained, did I escape, or was I just waiting for the next encounter? The shadows were still there, and the creature, whatever it was still out there, waiting. A cold shiver ran down my spine as the figure's voice echoed through the abandoned factory. My instinct screamed at me to run, but I couldn't. Travis needed me. I couldn't leave him behind again. The figure took a step forward, its cloak swishing with the movement. Despite its dark, hooded appearance, something about it felt eerily familiar. I couldn't place it, but the dread in my gut told me this was no ordinary person. Whoever or whatever it was, it had been waiting for me. "You've come at last," the figure whispered, its voice still chillingly distorted. "It's been a long time since we last spoke, David." I clenched my fists, the adrenaline coursing through my veins as I instinctively stepped between Travis and the cloaked figure. "What do you want with him?" I demanded, my voice more forceful than I felt. The figure's laughter was low and almost mocking. "It's not what I want from him, David. It's what he's meant to do." "Meant to do," I echoed, confusion mixing with fear. What does that even mean? Who are you? The figure finally took off its hood, revealing a face that I recognized. It wasn't someone I knew well, but someone whose face I'd seen in the photographs in Travis's notebook. The drawings of symbols had now come to life, and they weren't the random scrawlings of an obsessed mind. They were the markers of something much older, darker. "I am the Watcher," the figure said, its voice taking on a mocking tone, as if it was savoring the fear in my eyes. "And you, David, are just another piece of the puzzle, just like your friend Travis." My blood ran cold. This was all connected, the disappearances, the symbols, the strange occurrences in Stillwater. It was all part of something bigger, something I couldn't even begin to comprehend. "You don't have to do this," I said, my voice shaking as I tightened my grip on the flashlight. The only thing I had to defend myself. "Let him go, whatever you think he's supposed to do. You're wrong." The Watcher tilted its head, an unsettling, almost amused look crossing its face. "You have no idea, do you?" it said softly, stepping closer, its eyes glowing faintly in the dim light. "This has been planned for years, and you've only just begun to understand." I looked at Travis, who was still sitting in the chair, his eyes wide with confusion and fear, too weak to move or speak. His hands were bound, and his gaze darted between me and the figure with growing panic. "Travis, I'm getting you out of here," I said, my voice steady, though my heart was hammering in my chest. I took another step towards him, but the Watcher reached out and grabbed my arm with surprising strength. "You don't get to leave yet, David," it said, its voice like a cold wind. "Not until you understand why you're here." Before I could react, the ground beneath us seemed to shift. The symbols on the floor began to glow faintly, and the air thickened, growing heavier with each passing second. I tried to pull away, but the Watcher's grip tightened. "This place," the Watcher continued, its voice becoming more distant, "it's a doorway. You've opened it, whether you realize it or not. The past, the present, and the future are all bound together in these woods, and now you will witness it firsthand." Suddenly, the world around me seemed to blur, as if time itself was warping. The factory walls faded, replaced by shifting images of ancient forests, dark figures moving in the shadows, and faces of people I didn't recognize, yet felt a deep connection to. "Remember," the Watcher whispered as the vision grew more intense. "You've always been part of this. You just didn't know it." I felt myself being pulled into the vision, my body paralyzed, trapped between two realities. Travis's voice broke through the fog, faint but urgent. "David, get out of here. You don't know what you're dealing with." But it was too late. The Watcher's grip didn't loosen, and the darkness surrounding us deepened, swallowing us whole. For a long time, I drifted in the dark, lost in the swirling images of past and future, unable to move, unable to breathe. I heard the Watcher's voice again, faint, as if it was coming from the very heart of the forest itself. "When the time comes, David, when the Watchers call, you will know what to do." And then, just as suddenly as it had all begun, the vision stopped. I was back in the factory, kneeling on the cold floor beside Travis, who was now free from the ropes that bound him. "What just happened?" Travis gasped, looking around in shock. The room seemed to have returned to normal, but the unease still lingered. I shook my head, trying to process everything that had just occurred. I don't know, but we need to leave. Now." We didn't waste any time. We ran through the building and out into the night, back to the truck, our hearts racing with every step. As I sped away, the factory disappeared in the rearview mirror. But the words of the Watcher echoed in my mind. "You've always been part of this." I didn't know what it meant, but I knew one thing for certain: our lives had changed that night, and whatever dark force we had awoken, it wasn't over. It would never be over. As the years go by, the memory of that night remains etched in my mind, and every now and then, when the wind howls just right, I hear the whispers again. I can't escape them. The Watchers are still watching, and they're waiting as I lay there. The familiar hum of the town outside my window seemed both distant and present, as if the whispers of the past were never far away. I reflected on everything that had happened, the monsters we faced, the truths we unearthed, and the secrets we were never meant to know. Stillwater had changed, and so had I, the world around us. The one we thought we understood had become just a little more mysterious, a little more uncertain. In the quiet moments of the night, I often wondered if the darkness we'd faced had truly been vanquished, or if, like an old wound, it was merely lying dormant, waiting for the right moment to re-emerge. But as I closed my eyes, I knew one thing: we had survived. Travis, Sheriff Green, the people of Stillwater, we had all made it through the worst, and in a strange way, that was enough. I thought about Travis, still out there in the world, searching for answers. Part of me wanted to tell him to stop, to find peace, but I understood why he couldn't. There are some mysteries that keep gnawing at you, pulling you into their depths until you can't turn away. He may have found his path, and I had found mine. I thought about the people of Stillwater, too. They didn't know everything, but they had seen enough to be changed. Maybe they hadn't experienced the full weight of what we had uncovered, but they had come to understand one thing. There are shadows in the world, and it's better to face them together than to let them grow in silence. As I drifted off to sleep, the weight of the past faded, replaced by a fragile sense of peace. I may never have the answers to all the questions, but I had learned that some mysteries are meant to be left unsolved. It's the way we live in spite of them, the way we carry on, that matters most. Tomorrow would come with its own set of challenges. But for tonight, I had a moment of stillness, a moment to simply be, and that, for now, was enough. The clock ticked quietly on, and another day in Stillwater ended, as quietly as it had begun. I pulled the covers tighter around me and closed my eyes, knowing that whatever the future held, I was no longer alone in facing it.